Welcome back to the channel. This will be my final team selection video of the season, at least for Fantasy Premier League, because there's one more headed your way for UCL Fantasy, and this will be for Gameweek 38 with 2 free transfers and no chips remaining. And what you see on screen is my FPL Challenge squad, which I'll also talk about in my deadline stream on Sunday. And if you want to see a reaction stream as well, then let me know down in the comment section below and like this video. Let's get it to over 100, and also be sure to subscribe, share the video and all that good stuff. And let me know if you want to see Club World Cup fantasy content, because that game has been released very recently and it has a few interesting rules as well, and I can cover that if the demand is there. But for FPL Challenge, I've got David Raya, Kirkes, Salah, Bowen captain and Isak. I'll provide an update on the Swedish striker, which was talked about by Eddie Howe in his press conference on Friday morning, and also talk about the top 10 captains in my deadline stream and everything you need to know from team news, injury updates, and a lot more, with stats, fixture breakdown, and also my plans for Gameweek 38 in this team selection video as well. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it. As always, I'll review the previous game week, which was 37. I only had one free transfer and I decided to roll, and it was a very frustrating game week in the end. But one of the few positives was David Raya, who kept a clean sheet in a 1-0 victory over Newcastle, as Arsenal secured Champions League football for the 3rd consecutive season. And David Raya is looking to make it back-to-back Golden Glove awards. Of course, he won it last year. He's currently tied with Sells on 13, and Nottingham Forest host Chelsea, and Arsenal have a trip to Southampton, which hasn't been a happy hunting ground for the Gunners. Their record at St Mary's is actually quite poor in recent seasons. But in my defensive line, I had Munoz, Milenkovic and Gvardiol, so very mixed bag. In previous game weeks, it was the Colombian and Croatian who got the returns, but they both blanked on this particular occasion. The 2 FA Cup finalists of Crystal Palace ended up lifting the trophy, and Munoz got an assist there, but no FPL points to show for it. They beat Wolves comprehensively in the end, but Daniel Munoz only got a 1-pointer, and Gvardiol got 2 points after a late consolation goal by Jebison. But Milenkovic scored. That was a positive there. Nottingham Forest clean sheet was wiped out, but I gained something there from Milenkovic finally scoring whilst in my team. But on the whole, it was a decent showing from my defensive line when you also factor in my goalkeeper. But the same can't be said about my midfield. 2 of the players who returned are very template in Mbeumo and Rodgers, and Mbeumo scored but also missed a penalty against Fulham, and that wasn't that bad actually, because his effective ownership was over 100%. He was a very template captain and it was eventually my vice. But my captain Mohamed Salah essentially missed an open goal on Monday night against Brighton, and that would have been a difference maker and enough to secure a green arrow. In the case of Morgan Rodgers, he got an assist in a 2-0 victory over Tottenham Hotspur on Friday night, and Kevin De Bruyne also missed an open goal in his final home game at the Etihad in a Man City shirt there. And Jacob Murphy was subbed on because Alexander Isak missed out entirely against Arsenal with a groin issue that he suffered from earlier this season. But we did get an update from Eddie Howe in the press conference today, and it was quite positive, but nothing definitive, and you can't really expect anything less from the Newcastle manager. And he said the following: he is doing okay, he hasn't trained with us yet, but he's made good progress through the week. The next couple of days will be absolutely crucial to his availability on Sunday. There's a chance he could play. It's difficult to give any more than that. Until he trains with us, we won't fully know how he's going to respond to the training and demands that the game will place upon him. We'll only play him if he's fit to contribute, but at the moment, he has an opportunity, potentially. So take from that what you will. It also opens up the door of me possibly selling Alexander Isak, which I'll talk about in the transfer plan section, but Jacob Murphy didn't do anything against the Gunners there. And my forward line includes Visser, who did extremely well, getting 10 points and being the star of my 15-man squad, and Mateus Cunha, who's been a dreadful signing in the last couple of weeks, and he didn't even start in Gameweek 37. So that's something that would definitely need to be rectified if we had future Gameweeks to consider as well. But now we have the last chance saloon. Alexander Isak is still doubtful and yellow flagged, and I might have to make other transfers instead. And on my bench, I've got the likes of Abruggen, Alexander Isak, also Livramento, and William Saliba, who is going to miss Gameweek 38 as covered in my recent FPL videos, the best team for the upcoming deadline, and also the transfer tips. And Jurriën Timber is another Arsenal defender who will miss out entirely against Southampton after having ankle surgery a couple of days ago. So what does that mean for my rank in terms of the players I had and how I did in Gameweek 37? Unfortunately, it was another crap performance, another underwhelming game week, and I got a red arrow to 197,000, which is by far my worst ever rank, but it is what it is. I'll try to take the learnings and some things that I did poorly this season and try to rectify it for the upcoming campaign, but there is also an element of luck that comes into it, and sometimes you need things to go your way. In my opinion, for Gameweek 37, Salah and De Bruyne missing open goals, I think were the turning points of the week, and even with just one of those goals going in, that would have been a game changer for me, but it is what it is, and you got to take the rough with the smooth, and that means only 49 points for Gameweek 37. 49 is a special number for Arsenal fans, but it's not something you want to see for your FPL team. But before I go to my transfer plans, let's discuss the prices, which have remained very stable in recent weeks, and that means my squad value is currently 103.9 million with 0.1 million in the bank. With spending power, if you use websites like fpl.team, it actually states that I've got 102.3 million to spend on my 15-man squad, and David Raya is currently 5.5 million. I've also got the likes of Munoz and Milenkovic at 5.2 million, Gavadio is 6.5, Salah went down a couple of times in the last couple of weeks to 13.6 million. Mbeumo is now quite stable at 8.3, and Morgan Rogers actually went up over the last week to 5.8. Kevin De Bruyne is 9.6, Jacob Murphy is 5.2, Visser is at 6.9 million, and we could see him at maybe close to 8 million going into next season, and all prices will be covered throughout the summer. And Matheus Cunha is 7.1, but that could easily change over the next couple of days. And on my bench for Bruggen is 4.6. Alexander Isak is actually 9.4, so he went down fairly recently. Livramento is 4.6, and William Saliba is 6.5, but that's another player who could easily drop before the Gameweek 38 deadline. But let's now discuss some possible transfers to improve this squad and end this season very strongly. And Saliba to Kivior is very standard and you could say quite basic, but what this would allow me is extra funds to maybe make some big upgrades in the midfield, and my preference would be to buy Jarrod Bowen and Saka simultaneously. Now, in order to do that, I would have to sell a big hitter like Mohamed Salah or perhaps Alexander Isak to fund those moves. I don't think Saliba to Kivior would quite cut it, unfortunately, without taking a -8 hit for Gameweek 38. So the other transfers I am looking at would include William Saliba to Kerkez instead of going to Kivior, but that wouldn't really help me in my quest of gaining more funds. But I also prefer Kerkez's attacking threat over the Polish centre-back, who's done a very decent job in Gabriel's absence. But in terms of hoping for a goal or assist, the chances are very slim on paper, but sometimes you do get these surprising picks and punts that work out very well, especially in a game week like 38, which has a lot of history, where you get high-scoring matches. And on the flip side of that sort of thing, an argument, you could say that a defender transfer isn't what you really want to make in such a game week where a lot of things have been sorted already, there's less pressure in a lot of these matches, and you really want to focus on the midfielders and forwards who have the high ceiling by some distance. And that's why I'm looking at De Bruyne to Saka as a potential move, but I can't afford it without making another downgrade, like I said. So buying one of Kerkez or Kivior in my defensive line is one route to making this transfer possible, but the other one is going to be something a little bit different. Jarrod Bowen, though, I have to say is probably my favourite midfielder for Gameweek 38. He has returned in 5 consecutive games. Could he make it 6? I think he definitely can, but he is going to be very template, I think, even as a captaincy option in terms of those who are engaged on YouTube and X. So this isn't anything groundbreaking. You're not going to gain a lot of your competitors, but it all does depend, because maybe some mini-league rivals you have don't have Jarrod Bowen, and in that sort of scenario, I'd highly recommend buying Jarrod Bowen for the final gimmick of this season. But selling Kevin De Bruyne for his final ever game in a Man City shirt, that could maybe backfire as well. And Man City have a great record against Fulham with 10 consecutive victories against them. But the way both teams are defending, I think that could be a high-scoring game, and I think it could go either way, with Man City also looking very vulnerable this season. So considering other transfers that I could make instead of buying one of Bowen or Saka, which is very likely for me, I think Isak to Evanussen is one of the best ways for me to find the funds necessary, and I do like Bournemouth's chances against Leicester, despite their loss earlier this season against the same opponent. But I also like Alexander Isak against Everton if he does start, and there is still a good chance they will do so, because Newcastle haven't secured Champions League football just yet, and we've got multiple teams like Nottingham Forest, Aston Villa, Chelsea and Newcastle, alongside Man City, who are all battling for 3rd, 4th and 5th spots, and that's where Alexander Isak could be risked against the Toffees. And I do think Newcastle scored plenty of goals, despite Everton being quite resolute defensively over the course of the season, but I do think there has been a drop-off since David Moyes has come in compared to Sean Dyche, and conversely, they have scored more goals and had more entertaining matches on the whole. So those are my transfer plans. I'm not going to make every single one of those transfers I just discussed, but one of Bowen or Saka is very likely, and ideally, I'd buy both of them at the same time. But for Gameweek 38, I'd have David Raya in goal, away to Southampton, and it's just a shame that William Saliba is out. Otherwise, I could easily get to a triple up in the Gunners with a defender, the goalkeeper, and also an attacker, but that won't be the case this time round. I just don't think it's really worth taking all those hits to make it possible, unless I really just go aggressive, buy Bowen and Saka at the same time, get Kivior, and go about it that way with a -8 hit taken overall. So in my defence, I would have the likes of Livramento, Kirkes, and Gavardio. That is my current plan, but instead of Kirkes, maybe I just go for Kivior instead and use 2 free transfers and sacrifice one of Saka or Bowen in the midfield. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, but I think clean sheets will be hard to come by in Gameweek 38. I personally don't see many of them being kept this week. Now, football is a game of opinions. You may feel differently about that, and it's completely understandable. But in terms of the most likely to keep a clean sheet, I think Arsenal, Bournemouth, and Newcastle is probably the top 3 in that order, and you'll see that reflected in the clean sheet odds on Sunday. But I've got Livramento at home to Everton, Kirkes potentially at home to Leicester, but that could be Kivior or another Arsenal defender instead. If I want to buy Saka in the midfield, then it would have to be Jakob Kivior instead of Calafiori or Ben White. And I've also got Gavardio away to Fulham. He actually scored at Craven Cottage last season in the run-in, and he has been very solid at centre-half in FPL terms since Gameweek 30 when I activated the wildcard all those weeks ago. Now in the midfield, I could have Bowen, Salah, Murphy and Mbeumo, and it's very likely I'll buy a Bowen instead of Saka if I had to pick only one of them. But in an ideal world, I'll get both of them, and that would have to mean one of Salah goes out, Alexander Isak up front, or I just take a -8 hit overall to keep those 2 template picks in the midfield and forward line and joggle about a little bit differently with my transfer plans. But that's where things get very interesting. So do I use 2 free transfers, take a -4 hit, or take a -8 and go ultra aggressive? And that's what it comes down to, and it'll all be determined and finalized in my deadline stream. But I'm very happy with this sort of structure. Mbeumo's very template. You're not going to gain too much by having him, but against Wolves away, I think he's a solid pick. He's also on penalties, and I know he missed one in Gameweek 37, but more often than not, he will score from those set pieces. And Jacob Murphy has been another great signing for me on the Gameweek 30 wildcard. He has tailed off in recent weeks, but for 5.2 million, you can't ask for too much more. And Mohamed Salah, only 1 goal since blank Gameweek 29, and the chances he missed against Brighton were criminal. And it's just a shame because I had a lot of faith in him and I captained him because his record against Brighton is very solid. But in the end, Liverpool lost once more. And Jeroboam against Ipswich Town, he did it in the reverse fixture. I could see him doing it again, and he's going to be a front runner for the captaincy. There's no doubt about it. And he's one of the few informed players in the midfield, like Brian Mbeumo, who is showing real consistency at the moment. Early in this campaign, we had Saka, Palmer, and Salah, with the Egyptian being clear of the rest. And now things have changed quite drastically in the landscape of FPL. But to complete this team, I'm looking to have 3 forwards in Wissa, Alexander Isak, and Mateus Cunha. One of them is still yellow flagged, and he could miss out in Gameweek 38, like I talked about before with the injury update by Eddie Howe. And Mateus Cunha is not secure by any means in terms of minutes. So this forward line doesn't look too great. And ideally, I'd also buy Evanilson up front. So check out my best team video for Gameweek 38. You can see my favourite picks in every single position. But I think the biggest misses from this team would be Saka or any Arsenal attacker like Leandro Trossard if he's available. He has been the informed Gunners attacker right now. Also Martinelli as a massive differential. And on top of that, I think Evanilson, those 2 assets I think would really help me in terms of my prospects of delivering a green arrow and ending this season as strongly as possible. On my bench, I've also got Verbruggen away to Tottenham, who are the Europa League champions. Also Rodgers away to Man United, Milenkovic facing Chelsea at home, and Munoz facing Liverpool away. I would have no interest whatsoever of starting the Colombian, as good as he's been recently with the goals and the assists from that position. I just think Liverpool will score multiple goals and end this season on a high. And it all comes down to the captaincy on top of the transfers that I make. Those aspects will definitely determine how I do in Game Week 38, and getting them spot on could turn this dismal season, which will end up being anyway, but it will kind of leave a better taste in your mouth, so to speak, if you can end this season getting that green arrow in 38 and doing the best you can from where you're currently at. And my current captaincy option is Jarrod Bowen, and Salah is my vice. If I were to bring in Saka or any Arsenal attacker, I think they would also become a front runner for the captaincy. And Alexander Isak is another one who is right up there, but he is a massive risk with that yellow flag, and he hasn't trained so far this week, which definitely makes him quite worrying and also a bit of a concern against Everton at home. But in terms of Mbeumo, Vissa, they're decent choices who aren't too far behind, I guess, but I'm not looking to captain Murphy or Matheus Cunha at this moment in time. The same goes for my defenders, who I practically never captain in Fantasy Premier League. But let's talk about the expected points. David Raya has 4.9, which is by far the highest of any goalkeeper for Game Week 38. Livramento has 4 in my defensive line, Kirkes has 4.3, and Gvardiol has 4.1. Mbeumo has 5.1, and Vissa is actually slightly lower this time round. In recent weeks, Fantasy Football Hub have backed him over Brian Mbeumo. Jacob Murphy only has 4, so Rodgers is marginally ahead, but he's on my bench at the moment. Mohamed Salah is at 6.8, the lowest I've seen from him in quite some time, but the form he's in is quite poor. He isn't scoring or assisting in most games right now, and he is being very frustrating. Those that sold him a few weeks ago would have done very well to spread the funds around and get the likes of Jarrod Bowen in the midfield, who currently has 5.1 expected points. That does seem a little bit low, but having said that, before this 5-game run that we've seen recently, he was a solid, consistent asset, but we weren't seeing the 8 to 10 pointers on a regular basis, which he's doing at this moment in time. And we've also got Isak, who is quite low at 4.8, but that's primarily because of the yellow flag. And Matheus Cunha is also at a similar metric there, and it's actually even lower this time out because of the expected minutes that we have seen in recent weeks. But this will be his final game in a Wolves shirt. Let's see if he gets the start and wraps up his Wolves career in style. And on my bench, I've got Verbruggen at 3.3, Rodgers at 4.1, Milenkovic is also at 3.3, and Daniel Munoz is at 2.8. I think it's fair on the whole, and you'll see the final predicted points for the top 10 players using Fantasy Football Hub in my deadline stream, amongst many other graphics and stats. So you have the full coverage and the ultimate analysis for Game Week 38, and you can have all the information you need to make your final transfers, captain the right player, and end this season very strongly, winning your mini leagues and rising up the rankings. Another great tool which will help you achieve your FPL goals is the website fpl.team, which I've been using all season to compare different transfer plans and chip strategies. And there is the possibility that I keep William Saliba, so I don't buy Kivior or Kirkes in that defensive line. I can start Milenkovic at home to Chelsea and instead sell De Bruyne and Rodgers to Saka and Jarrod Bowen, but it does mean Alexander Isak is removed for Evanilson, and I would only do these transfers for sure if Alexander Isak is benched and we get that information before the deadline, or is left out of the squad entirely. In that case, I'd be very happy to take this -4 hit and be ultra aggressive, you could say, for the final game week of this season. The expected points is 54, and I've got 0.6 million in the bank with these current provisional transfers. So this is something else I'm looking at, and perhaps I don't need to take a -8 here to buy Saka and Bowen at the same time. And Evanilson is one of my favourite players for the final game week of this season, but it does mean Jacob Murphy is on the bench. That's one of my only slight gripes with these transfer plans. I could see him doing really well in the final game week, so perhaps I drop Cunha instead, but he got 9 points against Brentford in the reverse fixture, which ended up as a 5-3 win for Brentford. But Cunha is just a bonus points machine. It's all about his minutes. If he doesn't start the game, then that would obviously be quite regretful, and I might be quite frustrated by starting him. But I think in the forward line, there aren't many who really stand out this week with the fixture as well and the minutes. But Evanilson is one of those players, and bringing him in is pretty much a perfect kind of scenario there. But ideally, it would be alongside Isak and Vissa if they're all fit to start and fully available. But that is going to be what it comes down to in my Game Week 38 deadline stream. I think Isak is the key to everything. So if he does start, I'd be happy to keep him, but it also kind of prevents me from doing these transfers. And don't get me wrong, you can take a risk sell a template player like him and instead go for a differential like Evanescence, who is currently at 4.2% ownership, and then buy Bowen and Saka in the midfield and match a lot of those on the free hit wildcard, or those who are in a great position or have been for the last couple of weeks. And the captaincy would be between Bowen or Saka in this particular instance. I would rank both of them higher than Mohamed Salah as things stand. But even in the case of Saka, I don't think we've seen the best of him for several months now since he got injured on the 21st of December. So I think with the midfield, Jeroboam has been the informed player, but the likes of Saka, Salah, Palmer, we'll see the best of them very soon. If not in Game Week 38, then it will be next season, and all of that will be covered throughout the summer. That concludes the final FPL team selection video of this season. With only 2 free transfers and no chips remaining, it could be seen as a struggle to end this season with a green arrow, but it's still possible. You need a bit of luck sometimes in Fantasy Premier League, but with the right decisions, you give yourself the best chance of getting the ranks you want and also of ending the season as strongly as possible. Be sure to check out my FPL content, not just this video of course, but also the best team for Game Week 38 and also the transfer tips, where I highlight 11 players to buy, hold, sell and skip. And it doesn't stop there, because on Sunday I'll be going live one last time for the deadline stream, and there could also be a reaction stream if you want to see it. So make sure to let me know in the comment section down below, and also like this video. Let's get it to over 100 likes, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell and all that good stuff, sharing and all of that you can do to boost us in the algorithm. And for UCL Fantasy, I'll be producing a best team video for that as well, for match day 17, combining the wildcard and the limitless chips. I also talk about my team selection with 5 free transfers for the Champions League final. And on the 31st of May, I'll be going live for match day 17. So there's plenty of content still to look forward to. Also check out my Twitter, Instagram and Blue Sky, Dylan RCM, the Discord server, FPL League and Spotify can also be found in the description. And you may want to see Club World Cup fantasy content, so also let me know down in the comment section below. And thank you very much for all your support throughout this season, especially to those that watch every single video and live stream, and to all the members, patrons and subscribers. I'll see you very soon. I hope you do very well and end the season very strongly for both UCL Fantasy and FPL. And I'll see you on Sunday for one more deadline stream.